Stop. You haven't subscribed to the channel yet. Subscribe now. We have new stories every day. Now, let's go. The Harrison mansion sat like a fortress overlooking Los Diablos shore, all sharp angles and glass, reflecting the Hidalgo sunset in shades of orange and gold. Ethan Harrison stood at the window of his home office, watching the colors bleed across the sky. At 39, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man who owned not just the room, but everything his eyes could see. He adjusted his cufflinks, platinum, understated but expensive. Everything about Ethan was like that. Power without flashiness, wealth without attention, a kingdom built in shadows. His phone vibrated. Ethan glanced at the screen, nodded once, and slipped it back into his pocket. Mr. Harrison. Dustin Wilson stood at the doorway, military straight, despite having left the Marines 15 years ago. At 42, he remained as dangerous as the day Ethan had hired him, perhaps more so. Experience had only honed his edges. The shipment arrived clean. 40 cars, all accounted for. Buyers are ready. Ethan nodded. And the casino numbers? Up 20% from last week. The new location is working out. Good. Ethan's voice was low, controlled. Keep Dixon in line. I don't want him getting creative with the tables again. Dustin's lips twitched in what passed for a smile. Already handled. He won't be walking right for a week. Most people would have flinched at the implication. Ethan merely nodded again, satisfied. He didn't enjoy violence. But in his world, respect came from fear. Fear came from consequences. Will you be joining Mrs. Harrison for dinner? Dustin asked, his tone perfectly neutral. Ethan checked his watch. Not tonight. I have business downtown. Dustin nodded and left without another word, his footsteps silent against the marble floor. Ethan turned back to the window, watching a yacht cut through the water in the distance. To the outside world, Ethan Harrison was a successful businessman with interests in real estate and imports. Only a select few knew about the luxury cars that arrived with paperwork as fake as the smiles at Sunrise Gala, where exclusive underground casinos, where millions changed hands nightly. Ethan had built his empire brick by brick, starting with nothing but street smarts and a ruthless inability to accept defeat. 20 years later, he employed dozens of people, all loyal, all well paid, all afraid of what would happen if they crossed him. The door opened again, the scent of expensive perfume preceding his wife. Ethan. Marissa's voice was honey smooth, practiced to perfection. At 34, she remained as beautiful as the day he'd met her, a former model with golden hair, startling blue eyes, and a figure that turned heads from across the room. You're still here. I thought you had meetings. Leaving now. Ethan turned, taking in his wife of 7 years. She wore a red dress that hugged every curve, diamonds at her throat and wrist. Her makeup was flawless, her hair styled in loose waves. Perfect, always perfect. You look nice. Charity auction at the Cardinal Club. She approached, placing a manicured hand on his chest, leaving a faint lipstick mark as she kissed his cheek. Don't wait up. These things always run late. Ethan nodded, noting the slight tremble in her fingers, the extra care she'd taken with her appearance. The auction was real. He'd already verified that, but he doubted it would claim much of Marissa's time tonight. Have fun, he said simply. She smiled, all white teeth and practiced charm. Always do. After she left, Ethan walked to his desk and unlocked the bottom drawer. Inside sat a small electronic device. He picked it up, pressed a button, and watched a blinking dot move across the screen. Marissa's car, heading not toward the Cardinal Club, but toward downtown Los Diablos. Ethan returned the tracker to the drawer. He didn't slam it shut. He didn't curse. He didn't throw things or rage. Ethan Harrison never lost control. Control was everything. Then he made one call. Follow the Mercedes. Keep your distance. I want photos, times, names. Then he headed to his own car, a matte black Bentley with bulletproof glass. Tonight, he had an empire to run. Tomorrow, well, tomorrow would depend on what his wife decided to do. The underground casino operated out of what appeared to be an abandoned warehouse in an industrial section of Los Diablos. Inside, however, was another world entirely. Crystal chandeliers hung from high ceilings, plush carpets muffled footsteps, and the air smelled of expensive cigars and anticipation. Ethan moved through the space like a shark through water, smooth, purposeful, with everyone aware of his presence without him making a sound. Men and women in evening wear nodded respectfully. Dealers stood straighter. Security guards touched their earpieces. Mr. Harrison, a heavy-set man with thinning hair, approached, hand extended. "Good to see you again." "Governor," Ethan shook the man's hand firmly. "Enjoying yourself?" "Always do." The politician lowered his voice. "That matter we discussed is handled," Ethan finished. "The zoning commission will see things our way. Enjoy your evening." The man nodded gratefully and drifted back to his table, where he was losing a considerable amount of money. Ethan didn't mind. The governor would be useful in other ways. For hours, Ethan circulated. He spoke with high rollers and politicians, with celebrities and criminals. All of them treated him with the same mixture of respect and wariness. None of them knew the full extent of his operations, and that was exactly how Ethan wanted it. By midnight, he had finished his business. 3 deals closed, 2 problems solved, 1 threat eliminated. Ethan drove home along the coastal highway, the dark ocean stretching endlessly to his left. He didn't turn on the radio. He preferred silence, the space to think. His phone buzzed once, a message from the surveillance team. Target entered the Eastern Oasis apartments at 9:17 p.m. Male identified as Ryan King arrived at 9:30 p.m., both still inside. Photos attached. Ethan opened the first image, his wife laughing, wineglass in hand, entering a luxury apartment building downtown. The second showed a man, tall, tan, with the artificial good looks of someone who spent too much time at the gym. The third showed Marissa's car parked next to a flashy red Ferrari. Ryan King. Ethan recognized the name. A so-called yacht dealer who had approached him about an investment opportunity months ago. Ethan had turned him down, sensing something off about the man's proposal. Apparently, he'd found another way to get close to Harrison money. Ethan put the phone away and continued driving, his expression unchanged. Inside, gears turned, calculations made. This wasn't the first time a man had looked at Marissa with desire. It wasn't even the first time she'd flirted back. But this felt different, more planned, more dangerous. When he arrived home, the mansion was quiet. The staff had gone for the night. Ethan moved silently through the house, up the grand staircase, down the hallway to the master bedroom. Marissa lay in their bed, her breathing too even, too measured for true sleep. Her clothes had been carefully hung up, her makeup removed. On the surface, nothing seemed out of place. Ethan stepped closer, inhaling deeply. There was a faint but distinct cologne that wasn't his, a scent that clung to her hair, her skin, evidence she hadn't been careful enough to erase. He watched her for a moment longer, this beautiful stranger in his bed. Then he turned and walked to one of the guest rooms. He would sleep there tonight, and tomorrow he would begin gathering more information. Ethan Harrison never made a move without knowing the full board. The Eastern Oasis apartments stood like a gleaming needle piercing the Los Diablos skyline, its glass exterior reflecting the afternoon sun. Inside one of the penthouses, Marissa Harrison kicked off her designer heels and poured herself a glass of white wine, the bottle worth more than what most people made in a day. He didn't suspect anything. Ryan King asked, loosening his tie as he emerged from the bedroom. At 37, he carried himself with the confident swagger of a man who believed in his own charm. His dark hair was expensively cut, his tan carefully maintained, his teeth whitened to an unnatural brightness. Ethan. Marissa laughed, the sound practiced to perfection. He barely looks at me anymore, too busy with his empire. She waved her hand dismissively, diamonds catching the light. He thinks I'm at a charity event right now. Ryan moved behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, nuzzling her neck. His loss. Marissa leaned into him, but her eyes remained calculating, fixed on the Los Diablos skyline. Did you talk to your contact about the yacht? All set, Ryan reached for his own glass. 3 months cruising the Caribbean. By the time we're done, we'll have decided where to settle. Somewhere without extradition, Marissa murmured. Ryan raised an eyebrow. You worried about something, babe? Marissa turned to face him, her expression suddenly serious. You don't know Ethan like I do. He's dangerous, Ryan. Really dangerous. If he figures out what we're doing. He won't. Ryan guided her to the couch, sitting beside her. Think about it. We leave on a legitimate vacation. Your doting husband thinks you're taking a cruise with your girlfriends. You've done it before, right? Only this time, you don't come back. We make it look like an accident. By the time anyone starts looking, we're long gone with enough cash to set up anywhere we want. And once we're in international waters, we're ghosts. He grinned, raising his glass in a toast. To our new life. Marissa clinked her glass against his, but doubt lingered in her eyes. I've lived with him for 7 years, Ryan. I've seen what happens to people who cross him. He's not going to find us. Ryan insisted, growing tired of her fears. And even if he tried, once we're out of the country, what can he do? Marissa didn't answer, but the fear never quite left her eyes. As she dressed to leave, Ryan received a text. He checked it out of Marissa's sight, his face hardening. Payment due in 3 days, or we find you. He deleted it immediately, forcing his smile back into place as Marissa kissed him goodbye. 2 weeks, she reminded him. 2 weeks, he agreed, watching her leave. After the door closed, Ryan poured himself a stronger drink, his hand shaking slightly. 2 weeks might not be soon enough. He needed to accelerate their plan. He pulled out a burner phone and dialed a number from memory. Yeah, it's me, he said when someone answered. Listen about that yacht. We need it sooner, much sooner. Ethan sat in his private office at the main casino, reviewing security footage from cameras he had installed in his home months ago. A glass of whiskey sat untouched by his hand as he watched Marissa moving through their mansion, speaking on her phone in places she thought were private, carefully checking rooms before making calls. The door opened without a knock. Only one person would dare. You need to eat something, Barbara said, placing a container on his desk. You've been at this for hours. Ethan didn't look up from the screen. I'm fine. Barbara settled into the chair across from him, her eyes taking in the security footage. The files spread across the desk, the dark circles under her son's eyes. That woman is lying to you, she said bluntly. She's not smart enough to cover her tracks. Ethan paused the video, finally meeting his mother's gaze. I know. The simple acknowledgement surprised Barbara. She had expected denial, excuses, some attempt to protect the beautiful wife he'd chosen against her advice. You know. For how long? 3 months, 2 weeks, 4 days. Ethan's precision was characteristic. That's when I first noticed the discrepancies in the accounts, the missing jewelry, the calls that came too late at night. And you said nothing. Disbelief colored Barbara's voice. You just watched. Ethan leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. What would you have me do? Confront her without understanding the full scope. Make accusations without proof. He shook his head. That's not how I operate. So instead, you spy on your own wife. I gather information. He gestured to the files on his desk. I've had her phone cloned for months. I know every call, every text, every place she visits. Barbara's eyes widened slightly. You've been tracking her. Of course. Ethan said it as if it were the most natural thing in the world. I know about Ryan King. I know about the penthouse. I know about the money she's been skimming. Then why? Because I want to know how far she'll go. For the first time, a hint of emotion, cold, Controlled anger crept into Ethan's voice. I want to know what she's planning, who else is involved, what she knows about my business. Barbara fell silent, studying her son. Ethan had always been different, even as a child. He calculated and planned while other boys acted on impulse. His mind worked like a supercomputer, always several steps ahead, always seeing patterns others missed. She never deserved you, Barbara finally said. Ethan didn't respond to that. Instead, he turned back to the screen, starting the video again. She's planning something with King, something bigger than just an affair. What are you going to do? Barbara asked. Ethan's face remained impassive, but his eyes held a deadly focus. For now, nothing. I watch. I wait. I'll let the noose tighten around her neck. And then, the question hung in the air between them. Ethan took a sip of his whiskey, then set the glass down with precise control. And then, he said softly, I remind everyone what happens to people who betray Ethan Harrison. Barbara saw something in her son's eyes that made her own widen slightly. In that moment, he looked so much like his father, not the broken drunk of later years, but the fearsome man who'd commanded respect in the early days. The man people had both loved and feared. She reached for his hand, squeezing it once. Just be careful. Don't let this consume you. Ethan's smile was cold. This isn't emotion, Mother. It's business. She made a poor investment decision. Now she'll face the consequences. After Barbara left, Ethan returned to his surveillance. He opened a file on his computer, not video this time, but audio. He pressed play, and Marissa's voice filled the room. He suspects nothing. Ethan's too busy with his precious business to notice what's right in front of him. A male laugh. His loss, my gain. Ethan stopped the recording, his expression unchanged. Let them believe he was oblivious. Let them plot and plan. Let them think they were smarter than him. The tighter they wove their web of lies, the more completely they would trap themselves within it, and Ethan Harrison would be there when the web finally collapsed. The morning sun streamed through the windows of Ethan's private office as he studied the documents spread across his desk. For weeks, he had been piecing together Marissa's plan, tracking money movements, phone calls, and meetings. Now the complete picture lay before him. A 3-month cruise, Ethan murmured, examining the itinerary he'd obtained from his wife's email. The luxury yacht would depart Los Diablos, making stops throughout the Caribbean, Rose Cay, Antigua, the Malins, and beyond. Perfect for someone who wanted to disappear. International waters, multiple jurisdictions, easy access to banking havens. Dustin entered the room, closing the door silently behind him. We've confirmed it. Mrs. Harrison booked the trip 3 weeks ago. She told her friends she's going alone, finding herself after some marital problems. Ethan's mouth twitched slightly. Creative. There's more. Dustin placed a folder on the desk. King has debts. Big ones. He owes money to the Ramirez family. They're not known for their patience. So that's his angle. Ethan opened the folder, scanning the contents. He needs money quickly, and my wife is his golden ticket. Dustin nodded. From what we gathered, they plan to access the offshore account once they're in the Malins, then vanish. Ethan leaned back, fingers steepled beneath his chin. She thinks I don't know about the money she's been stealing. Almost $2 million, sir. A considerable sum. Ethan's voice betrayed no emotion, but not life-changing for someone accustomed to our lifestyle. Dustin stood at attention, waiting. He knew his boss well enough to recognize when a plan was forming. Ethan rose and walked to the window, looking out over the Los Diablos skyline. Call Torres. I want a complete asset review by noon. Every account, every property, every investment Marissa has accessed. Yes, sir. And Dustin, find out everything about King's yacht. Size, crew, ownership details. Dustin nodded, turning to leave. But Ethan wasn't finished. One more thing. Ethan's voice was calm, measured. Contact Barbara. Tell her to expect some deliveries at her house later today." After Dustin left, Ethan made a series of calls. Each conversation was brief, direct, no explanations, just instructions. By noon, the reports began flowing in. Ethan reviewed each one meticulously. At 8:02, his phone rang. "It's done," Torres reported. "All joint accounts emptied, assets in her name liquidated, credit cards canceled. The safe deposit boxes have been cleared, and the house staff given 2 weeks paid leave, effective immediately. Security team reassigned to your downtown properties." Ethan nodded, though Torres couldn't see him. "Good. What about the offshore account?" "Frozen. She'll need authorization codes, only you have them, to access it from the Malins." "Perfect." Ethan hung up, a cold smile forming on his lips. Then he opened his laptop and navigated to his home security system. Through remote cameras, he could see movers systematically packing Marissa's possessions, clothes, jewelry, personal items, all carefully boxed and loaded in advance. His phone buzzed with a text from Marissa. "We'll be home late. Dinner with Melissa." Another lie. His tracking app showed her at the spa, then shopping, preparing for her escape. Ethan typed a response. "Enjoy yourself." He closed the laptop and moved to his private bar, pouring himself a rare midday drink. This wasn't celebration. This was preparation, the calm focus before executing a plan. His phone rang again. "Dustin." "Sir, we found something interesting. The yacht King booked. It's not his. It's chartered through a shell company that traces back to one of your competitors, Jefferson Marine Holdings." Ethan froze, glass halfway to his lips. "Jefferson," he repeated, a rival who had tried to muscle in on Ethan's territory last year. A man Ethan had systematically dismantled business by business until he backed off. "So Jefferson's providing the escape vehicle. Interesting." Ethan set the glass down. "Untouched. Change of plans. Contact our friend at the charter company. I want that booking canceled and replaced with our yacht, the Kingmaker. Same departure date, same time. Make sure King receives confirmation that everything is proceeding as planned." Ethan's voice hardened. "But the yacht will be mine. The crew will be ours." "Understood." Dustin paused. "What about Mrs. Harrison?" "She'll never make it to the dock." Ethan's voice was ice. "By then, she'll understand exactly who she tried to betray." When evening came, Ethan drove home for the first time in days. The mansion felt different, emptier, hollowed out. He walked through the spaces that had been stripped of Marissa's presence, her closets cleared, her vanity bare. In the bathroom, not even a toothbrush remained. He stopped in their bedroom, opening the safe hidden behind a painting. Inside lay a small velvet box. He flipped it open to reveal Marissa's wedding ring, a 7-carat diamond in platinum that had cost more than most people's homes. Ethan took the ring and moved to his study. On the heavy wooden desk, he placed the ring, then took a letter opener. Sterling silver, a gift from Marissa on their first anniversary. With deliberate force, he drove the opener through the ring, embedding it into the wood. The platinum band twisted, the diamond cracked under the pressure. Beside it, he placed a handwritten note. "You played the wrong game." Ethan stepped back, surveying his work. The trap was set. Now all that remained was watching it spring. Ethan watched from the security feed of his yacht as Ryan King boarded, duffel bag in hand. The man moved with the cocky confidence of someone who thought he'd won. Ethan almost pitied him. Almost. "He's aboard," Dustin confirmed through the phone. "Thinks the captain is part of the charter company. We got him, sir." "Good. Stay out of sight until I arrive." Ethan ended the call and checked his watch. 2 hours until Marissa would arrive at the harbor, bags packed for a new life. Time to make sure she understood what awaited her. He dialed his mother's number. "Everything's here," Barbara answered without preamble. "Every ridiculous shoe, every overpriced dress. What should I tell her when she calls?" "Exactly what we discussed." Ethan's voice was calm, controlled. Nothing more, nothing less. She deserves worse than this, Ethan. She'll get it. He ended the call and picked up his keys. The kingmaker awaited. Marissa Harrison couldn't stop smiling as she rolled her Louis Vuitton suitcases toward the waiting taxi. Freedom was so close she could taste it. 3 years of planning, of careful extraction of funds, of building her escape route, all about to pay off. Her phone rang just as the driver loaded her bags. Barbara's name flashed on the screen. Marissa nearly declined the call, but curiosity got the better of her. "Barbara, what a surprise. I'm just calling to ask what you want me to do with all your things." The older woman's voice was sharp as a blade. Marissa froze. "What are you talking about?" "Your things. Clothes, jewelry, makeup. Movers just dropped them off in my garage. Dozens of boxes. Must have stripped that house bare." The world tilted beneath Marissa's feet. "That's impossible. I'm looking at my suitcases right now." "Well, darling, I'm looking at the rest of your life packed in cardboard." "Oh, and your ring." Ethan smashed it before he threw it in the box. Barbara's voice dripped with satisfaction. "Seems my son finally wised up." Marissa's hand trembled as she ended the call. This couldn't be happening. Not now. Not when they were so close. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Ethan. "I'm on a ship with your lover. Tonight, he's going for a swim." Terror shot through her. She shoved the driver a $100 bill. "Change of plans. Take me to the Harrison estate. Now." The drive seemed endless. Marissa tried Ryan's phone repeatedly. No answer. She tried the charter company. They had no record of a booking in her name. She called the bank. Her cards had been canceled. When the taxi finally pulled up to the mansion gates, they refused to open. Her access code had been deactivated. She paid the driver and climbed the fence, tearing her designer dress in the process. The house loomed before her, dark and silent. No lights, no security guards. The spare key she kept hidden was missing. Marissa broke a side window and climbed through, cutting her arm. She rushed through the empty house, flipping on lights, calling Ethan's name. The place echoed with emptiness. Her closet was bare, her jewelry gone. In the bathroom, not even a towel remained. Panic rising, she staggered to Ethan's study and froze in the doorway. There, stabbed into his desk, was her wedding ring, twisted and broken. Beside it, the note in Ethan's precise handwriting. "You played the wrong game." Marissa collapsed to her knees, a scream building in her throat. She had always known Ethan was dangerous, but she had never truly understood how dangerous until this moment. Her phone buzzed again. Another text from Ethan. "Ryan says hello. For now." Ethan arrived at the marina as the sun began to set, casting the Kingmaker in shades of orange and gold. The 120-foot yacht represented everything he valued: power, control, luxury without ostentation. Its sleek lines and dark hull promised speed and purpose. As he boarded, the captain nodded respectfully. "Everything's prepared, sir, as you requested." "Where is he?" "Main salon, having a drink. Thinks we're waiting for Mrs. Harrison." Ethan straightened his cuffs. "Make sure we're in international waters within the hour." "Yes, sir." Ethan moved through the yacht with deliberate steps, Dustin falling in silently behind him. They paused at the salon entrance. Through the doorway, Ethan could see Ryan King lounging on a leather sofa, whiskey in hand, admiring the view through the windows. "Wait here," Ethan told Dustin. "Let me handle this first." He entered the salon, and for a brief, satisfying moment, watched as Ryan's expression transformed from relaxed anticipation to shocked recognition. "Ethan." Ryan scrambled to his feet, whiskey sloshing over the glass. This isn't what it looks like." "No?" Ethan's voice remained pleasant as he moved to the bar, pouring himself a mineral water. "What is it then?" "Because it looks like you're on my yacht, drinking my liquor, waiting for my wife." Ryan's eyes darted toward the exit, but Dustin now filled the doorway, arms crossed. "Listen, Ethan, let's talk about this. Man to man." Ryan attempted a smile, his charm faltering under Ethan's cold stare. I know how this appears, but what? Ethan took a seat, gesturing for Ryan to do the same. Please, enlighten me. Ryan remained standing, shifting his weight nervously. Look, Marissa and I. It's not serious. Just a fling. These things happen, right? No need for this to get ugly. Ugly? Ethan smiled slightly. I don't do ugly, Ryan. I do precise, calculated. He sipped his water. So tell me about the $2 million my wife has been stealing. Tell me about the offshore accounts. Tell me about your plan to disappear in the Caribbean. The color drained from Ryan's face. I don't know what you're. Let's not insult each other's intelligence. Ethan set his glass down carefully. You're in debt to the Ramirez family. They want their money. You needed a way out. My wife became your solution. He tilted his head slightly. Am I wrong? Ryan swallowed hard. Ethan, listen. This is just business. You know how the game is. You're right. Ethan smiled, a gesture that never reached his eyes. This is business. He nodded once to Dustin, who stepped forward, grabbing Ryan's arm with mechanical efficiency. What are you doing? Get your hands off me. Ryan struggled uselessly against the former Marine's grip. We're going for a walk, Ethan said, rising. The night air will help clear things up. Dustin marched Ryan through the yacht and up to the deck, Ethan following at a measured pace. The engines rumbled beneath them as the Kingmaker moved steadily out to sea. Los Diablos's lights were already distant, the vast darkness of the Atlantic opening before them. Ethan, please. Ryan's voice cracked as Dustin forced him against the railing. We can work this out. I'll disappear. You'll never see me again. That's the plan. Ethan nodded to Dustin, who produced a length of rope and efficiently bound Ryan's hands behind his back. The night air was cool, the ocean breeze cutting through Ryan's expensive shirt. Below, dark water churned in the yacht's wake. You can have the money back. Ryan babbled, desperation in every word. All of it. I'll tell you where it is. Just let me go. Ethan stepped forward, his voice calm, almost conversational. You thought you could steal from me, lie to me, take my wife. He studied Ryan's terrified face. So tell me, Ryan, how well do you swim? Please, Ethan, I'm begging you. Tears streaked down Ryan's face. I'll do anything, give you anything, whatever you want. What I want, Ethan said softly, is for you to understand the cost of your choices. I understand. I swear I understand. Ryan's voice rose hysterically. It was a mistake, a terrible mistake. Ethan nodded, listening. You know what I've learned in business, Ryan. Some mistakes can't be fixed. Some decisions have permanent consequences. He stepped closer, his face inches from Ryan's. You made your choice when you decided to target my wife, when you helped her steal from me, when you planned to disappear with what's mine. Ethan, please. Ryan was sobbing now, all pretense of charm abandoned. I have money hidden, more than what Marissa took. It's yours, all yours. I don't need your money. Ethan's voice hardened. I need you to deliver a message. Ryan nodded frantically. Anything. I'll tell anyone anything you want. The message isn't for anyone else. Ethan placed a hand on Ryan's shoulder. It's for every person who thinks they can take what's mine and escape the consequences. Without warning, without raising his voice, without changing his expression, Ethan shoved. Hard. Ryan screamed as he fell backward over the railing, his bound hands making it impossible to grab anything. The splash was lost beneath the yacht's engines. Ethan looked down into the dark waters, watching as Ryan's head appeared briefly, upheld in the blackness before disappearing again. Enjoy your last deal, he called down, his voice carrying across the water. Dustin watched the struggling figure. Should we throw him a life preserver? No. Ethan's voice was final, brooking no argument. He made his choice. They stood at the railing, watching as Ryan thrashed desperately in the dark waters. His cries grew weaker, his movements more frantic. "He won't last long with his hands tied," Dustin observed dispassionately. "He wouldn't have lasted long anyway." Ethan's expression remained unchanged as Ryan's head dipped below the surface, then reappeared, gasping. "The currents here are strong." They watched in silence as the distance between the yacht and the struggling man grew. Ryan's head bobbed up and down, each reappearance more desperate than the last. "Enjoy your last deal," Ethan called out again, just as Ryan's head emerged one final time. Their eyes met across the expanse of dark ocean. Terror met cold justice. Then the waters closed over Ryan King forever. Ethan turned away from the railing, straightening his jacket with precise movements. "Tell the captain to return to port." As the yacht turned back toward Los Diablos, Ethan pulled out his phone and typed a message to Marissa. "Your lover couldn't swim. Your turn." The Kingmaker cut through the dark waters, its wake erasing any evidence of the man who now rested at the bottom of the Atlantic. No hesitation, no mercy, no rescue. This was business, and in business, as in life, Ethan Harrison never forgave. He simply collected what was owed. He stood at the stern, unmoved, untouched, undefeated. The ship sliced through the waters, returning to port, where the final act would begin. Marissa's punishment would be far more public, far more enduring than the swift justice Ryan had received. The ocean kept its secrets, and Ethan kept his promises. 3 days had passed since the night at sea. 3 days since Ethan had returned to shore alone, the Kingmaker's wake having erased all evidence of Ryan King. 3 days of Marissa calling constantly, her messages growing increasingly desperate. Ethan ignored them all. He sat in his office at the downtown high-rise, reviewing contracts for a new casino location. Business continued. Life moved forward. Only the slight tightening around his eyes betrayed any awareness of the storm raging outside his ordered world. His phone buzzed for the 20th time that morning. Marissa again. Ethan silenced it without looking at the message. Dustin entered, his expression neutral as always. "Sir, there's an update on the King situation," Dustin said. Ethan set down his pen. "Go on." "Missing persons report filed by his landlord. Police investigating. His car was found at the marina." "And the connection to us?" "None documented. The charter company has no record of his booking. The security cameras malfunctioned that night. The dock employees remember nothing." Dustin stood perfectly still, hands clasped behind his back. "It's being treated as a possible suicide. Financial troubles, gambling debts." Ethan nodded once. "Good." He returned to his paperwork. "Tonight, I'll be at the Silver Lion. Make sure security is briefed." The Silver Lion was Ethan's premier casino, a glittering palace of luxury and vice that catered to Los Diablos' elite. Tonight was a private event, invitation only, with politicians, celebrities, and business leaders gambling away fortunes while making deals worth even more. "Yes, sir." Dustin hesitated. "And if Mrs. Harrison attempts to make contact?" Ethan looked up, his gaze cold. "She's no longer welcome on any of my properties." Marissa Harrison stared at herself in the bathroom mirror of her cheap motel room. The woman looking back seemed like a stranger, mascara smudged, hair unwashed, designer clothes wrinkled from being slept in. 3 days of unanswered calls, 3 days of frozen accounts and closed doors. Her phone showed 15 missed calls to Ethan's lawyers, all unanswered. Every credit card declined, her few remaining friends suddenly unavailable. She splashed water on her face and tried to think. There had to be a way to fix this. Ethan was angry, yes, but they could talk, explain, negotiate. 7 years of marriage couldn't end like this. Determination hardened her features. She would find him face to face. She could make him listen. She always had before. Marissa applied fresh makeup, brushed her hair, and put on her most expensive remaining outfit, a red dress that had always caught Ethan's eye. Then she called a taxi. "The Silver Lion Casino," she instructed the driver, "downtown." She knew Ethan's schedule. Every Friday, he oversaw operations at his flagship casino. She would find him there. The Silver Lion rose from the Los Diablos skyline like a monument to excess, gold-tinted glass reflecting the setting sun. Valets in crisp uniforms attended to luxury cars. Marissa paid the taxi driver with her last $100 bill and approached the entrance with practiced confidence. The doorman, who had greeted her by name for years, stared straight ahead as if she were invisible. "Excuse me," she said, forcing brightness into her voice. "I'm here to see my husband, Ethan Harrison." No response. Not even a flicker of recognition. "I said I'm here to see Ethan Harrison, my husband, the owner." One doorman finally spoke, eyes still fixed on some point beyond her. "I'm sorry, ma'am. This is a private event. Invitation only." "I don't need an invitation. I'm Marissa Harrison. I have no Marissa Harrison on my list, ma'am." Anger flared. "Call Ethan. Tell him I'm here." "I'm not authorized to disturb Mr. Harrison." The man's voice remained mechanical. "Now, please step aside for our guests." Marissa's composure cracked. She pushed past the doorman, ignoring his protests, and strode into the casino's opulent main floor. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light over gaming tables, where Los Diablos' wealthy risked fortunes. The air smelled of expensive perfume and privilege. Security guards noticed her immediately, but she moved quickly through the crowd, scanning for Ethan. Several patrons recognized her, their expressions shifting from surprise to discomfort. Conversations halted mid-sentence as she passed. Then she saw him. Ethan stood near the high-stakes poker room, engaged in conversation with the mayor and two celebrities whose faces regularly graced magazine covers. He looked immaculate in a tailored suit, relaxed, smiling slightly at something being said. Marissa froze, struck by the utter normalcy of his appearance. While her world burned, he seemed untouched by the flames. She pushed forward, heart pounding. "Ethan," her voice carried across the casino floor. Heads turned. Silence spread like a wave. Ethan paused mid-conversation. Slowly, deliberately, he turned toward her voice. Their eyes met across the room. Hers desperate, his cold. "Ethan, please," she called, moving closer. "We need to talk." He watched her approach, his expression unchanging. The mayor and celebrities stepped back, sensing the tension. "What happened? Why are you doing this?" Marissa's voice cracked. "Everything's gone. The accounts, the house, my things. I can't even get my own property." Ethan regarded her silently, as if studying an interesting, but ultimately insignificant, specimen. "Say something." Her composure shattered completely. 7 years, Ethan. 7 years of marriage, and you throw me away without a word. "Security," Ethan said quietly. Two large men materialized beside her. "No." Marissa evaded their grasp. "Ethan, listen to me. This is all a misunderstanding. Ryan meant nothing. It was a mistake." Ethan's face remained impassive. Around them, the casino's patrons watched the scene unfold with the hungry interest of spectators at a gladiatorial match. "Who let the trash in?" Ethan finally spoke, his voice carrying in the silence. Laughter rippled through the crowd, nervous at first, then growing bolder. Marissa felt each chuckle like a physical blow. "You don't mean that," she whispered. "I only say what I mean." Ethan turned slightly, as if to rejoin his conversation. Security moved to intervene, but Marissa lunged forward, grabbing his sleeve. "Please, Ethan, I made a mistake. We can fix this." Security moved in again, but Ethan held up a hand, stopping them. He leaned closer to Marissa, close enough that only she could hear his next words. "Mistakes cost money," he said softly, his breath warm against her ear. "And you can't afford a thing anymore." He straightened, gently removing her hand from his sleeve. "Escort Mrs. Harrison out," he instructed security. "Make sure she understands she is no longer welcome on any of my properties." Marissa's legs gave way. She sank to her knees on the plush carpet, pride forgotten. "Ethan, please, don't do this. I have nowhere to go." "That's not my concern." He turned his back to her, returning to his conversation, as if nothing had happened. Security lifted Marissa to her feet. As they led her through the casino, past the staring crowds and whispered comments, she caught a final glimpse of Ethan calmly sipping champagne, laughing at something the mayor said, completely unmoved by her humiliation. Outside, the night air hit her like a slap. The doorman avoided her eyes as security released her at the curb. "Mr. Harrison says to tell you that you have until noon tomorrow to remove any remaining personal items from his mother's garage," one guard informed her. "After that, everything will be donated." They left her there, alone on the sidewalk, watching as the city's elite continued to arrive at the casino, a world she had been ejected from with surgical precision. Marissa wrapped her arms around herself, the Los Diablos heat suddenly insufficient against the chill that had settled in her bones. For the first time, she truly understood the man she had married, and the mistake she had made in betraying him. Her phone buzzed, a text from a number she didn't recognize. "Your mother's address has been sent to the taxi service. The driver has been paid. Consider it a final courtesy." As a cab pulled up to the curb, Marissa realized the full scope of her fall, from mansion to her mother's spare room, from credit cards, with no limit to not even owning a car. The driver looked at her expectantly. With no other options, she got in. Morning sunlight streamed through the faded curtains of her mother's guest room. Marissa stared at the ceiling, counting cracks in the plaster. 1 week since the casino, 1 week of silence from Ethan's lawyers despite her constant calls. A sharp knock at the door broke her reverie. "Marissa, there's someone here for you." Her mother's voice held a mixture of disapproval and curiosity. In the small living room stood a stern-faced woman in a business suit, holding a large envelope. "Marissa Harrison?" the woman asked, though she clearly knew the answer. "Yes. I'm here to serve you with legal documents on behalf of Ethan Harrison." She held out the envelope. "Please sign here to acknowledge receipt." With trembling fingers, Marissa signed the form. The woman nodded curtly and left without another word. Her mother hovered nearby, arms crossed. "What is it this time?" Marissa opened the envelope and pulled out a thick stack of legal papers. The heading on the first page made her stomach drop. "Petition for dissolution of marriage." She flipped through the pages, legal jargon blurring before her eyes until certain phrases jumped out. Adultery, fraudulent misappropriation of funds, conspiracy to commit theft. "He's divorcing me," Marissa whispered, "and he's accusing me of crimes." Her mother snorted. "Well, did you commit them?" Marissa looked up sharply. "That's not the point. He can't do this to me. We have a prenup. It guarantees me at least the house and a settlement." "Read the fine print, girl." Her mother pointed to a highlighted section. "Adultery voids all financial provisions. You know what that lawyer of his is worth. He wouldn't have left a loophole." Marissa scanned further, finding worse news with each page. Ethan was claiming all assets, citing her criminal conspiracy with Ryan King. There would be no alimony, no property division, not even her personal items beyond what she'd already collected. "This can't be legal," she protested. "Legal enough when you have his money and connections." Her mother settled into an armchair, watching her daughter with a mixture of pity and judgment. "I warned you about men like him. Powerful men don't forgive, and they don't forget. I need a lawyer." "With what money, Marissa? Your fancy credit cards don't work anymore. Your joint accounts are empty, and I'm living on Social Security." Her mother's voice softened slightly. "You made your bed, lying down with both your husband and that other man. Now you're going to have to sleep in it." Marissa sank onto the couch, the papers clutched in her hand. "There has to be something I can do." "There is. Get a job. Start over." Her mother nodded toward the newspaper on the coffee table. "The mall's hiring." Before Marissa could respond, her phone rang, a number she didn't recognize. "Hello? Mrs. Harrison, This is Detective Parker, Los Diablos Metro Police Department. We'd like you to come in for questioning regarding the disappearance of Ryan King. Marissa's blood ran cold. I don't understand. Why would you need to talk to me? We have evidence suggesting you had a relationship with Mr. King, who has been missing for over a week now. His phone records show numerous calls and texts between you. We also have financial records indicating unusual activity in accounts connected to both of you. I don't know anything about him being missing, Marissa stammered, though in her heart, she knew exactly what had happened to Ryan. The same thing that would happen to anyone who crossed Ethan Harrison. Be that as it may, we need to speak with you tomorrow, 10 a.m., at the station. The detective's tone left no room for argument. I should mention, Mrs. Harrison, that it would be in your best interest to cooperate fully. After the call ended, Marissa looked up to find her mother watching her with narrowed eyes. "What have you gotten yourself into, girl?" she asked. "Nothing," Marissa insisted, but the lie tasted bitter. "It's just a misunderstanding." Her mother shook her head, disappointment etched in every line of her face. "All those years, I warned you about chasing money instead of character. You laughed at me for being old-fashioned. Well, how's that working out for you now?" Marissa had no answer. Outside the window of her mother's modest home, she could see neighbors heading to work, children playing, normal lives unfolding. The world that had once been beneath her notice was now her reality. Her phone buzzed with a news alert. She opened it automatically, then wished she hadn't. The headline read, "Wife of business mogul Ethan Harrison linked to missing fraudster." The article detailed Ryan's criminal history, his outstanding debts, his suspicious relationship with the wife of prominent businessman Ethan Harrison. It mentioned the police investigation, sources suggesting Marissa might have been complicit in Ryan's financial schemes. There was no mention of Ethan's involvement in Ryan's disappearance, no hint that the man whose name appeared only as a wronged husband had pushed Ryan into the dark Atlantic with his own hands. Her mother peered over her shoulder at the article. "Well," she said, her voice heavy with resignation, "I hope that mall job is still open." Marissa closed her eyes, the full weight of her situation finally settling on her shoulders. No money, no status, no friends, a looming police investigation, and worst of all, the knowledge that Ethan had orchestrated every aspect of her downfall with the same methodical precision he applied to his business dealings. She had gambled with fire and lost everything, while the man who had burned her world to ashes continued his life untouched, unbothered by the destruction he had wrought. That night, as she lay on the too-small bed in her mother's spare room, Marissa finally understood the truth about the man she had married. Ethan Harrison didn't need to raise his voice or throw punches to be dangerous. His revenge, like everything else he did, was executed with cold, meticulous perfection, and she would be living with the consequences long after he had forgotten her name. 3 months later, the Kingmaker gleamed in the evening sun, its dark hull reflecting golden light as it sat moored in Ethan Harrison's private marina. The yacht had been completely remodeled, new deck, new furnishings, new name inscribed in elegant script. Final verdict. On board, Los Diablos' elite mingled in expensive evening wear, champagne flowing freely as a string quartet played on the upper deck. Politicians, celebrities, business leaders, all eager for an invitation to Ethan Harrison's exclusive gathering. Ethan stood at the bow, surveying his assembled guests with quiet satisfaction. He wore a tailored suit in midnight blue, a glass of water in his hand despite the champagne being passed around. He never drank alcohol at his own events. Control was everything. "Quite a turnout," observed a city councilor, approaching with an ingratiating smile. "Everyone who's anyone in Los Diablos is here." "Not everyone." Ethan's tone was neutral. "Just those who matter." The counselor laughed nervously. Of course. I want to thank you for your support on that waterfront development project. The vote passed this morning. I heard." Ethan's gaze remained on the horizon, where the Los Diablos skyline glittered against the darkening sky. "My construction team begins work next week." Wonderful, wonderful. The man fidgeted with his champagne glass. I should mention, there's been some talk about that business with your ex-wife, the police investigation, and all that. Ethan turned slightly, his eyes cooling several degrees. Is there a question in there, counselor? No, no question at all. Just expressing sympathy for your situation. My situation is excellent, Ethan said simply, but I appreciate your concern. Understanding the dismissal, the counselor retreated hastily, almost bumping into Dustin, who appeared silently at Ethan's side. Everything running smoothly? Ethan asked, though he already knew the answer. Dustin never allowed anything less. Yes, sir. The mayor has arrived. He's asking about that donation to his literacy program. Tell him it's been approved. Double the amount he requested, but make sure he understands my expectations regarding the downtown zoning changes. Dustin nodded and moved away, efficient as always. Ethan continued his survey of the yacht, noting which guests were speaking with whom, calculating alliances and opportunities with each observed interaction. He spotted Barbara holding court near the bar, elegant in black, entertaining a group of society women with what appeared to be a highly amusing story. Their laughter carried across the deck. His mother had always known how to work a room. Ethan made his way toward her, accepting nods and greetings from guests as he passed. Conversations paused briefly in his wake, then resumed with increased animation, everyone eager to show they were on good terms with their host. Ethan, Barbara called as he approached. I was just telling these ladies about your new acquisition, the hotel in Palm Beach. Just finalized yesterday, Ethan confirmed, offering a rare smile to his mother. The women murmured appropriate congratulations, asking questions about the property that Ethan answered with practiced charm. Business talk at a social gathering, carefully modulated to sound impressive without revealing anything of actual substance. When the women drifted away to refresh their drinks, Barbara leaned closer to her son. I saw her yesterday, she said quietly. Ethan didn't need to ask who her was. Where? Working at that department store in the mall, selling perfume. Barbara's satisfaction was evident. She looked terrible tired. Cheap clothes. She sipped her champagne. She saw me, too, turned white as a sheet. Ethan made a non-committal sound. Marissa Harrison had ceased to be relevant to his life the moment he had signed the divorce papers. The police closed their investigation into King's disappearance, he mentioned casually. Ruled it a suicide. Financial troubles, gambling debts, no body recovered. And Marissa? No charges, insufficient evidence of criminal conspiracy. Ethan's voice held no emotion, though her involvement has been thoroughly documented in the press. Barbara smiled. No one will hire her for anything worthwhile now, not with that cloud hanging over her. She's no longer my concern. Barbara raised her glass. I taught you well. Ethan inclined his head slightly, acknowledging the toast. His mother had indeed taught him valuable lessons about power, about leverage, about never showing weakness. Though the most important lesson, never trust completely, he had learned from his father's failures and his ex-wife's betrayal. Excuse me, he said, spotting a potential business connection across the deck. Duty calls. As the night progressed, Ethan moved through his guests with calculated precision, securing deals, making promises, collecting favors. The yacht party served multiple purposes: social display, business networking, and a clear message to Los Diablos' power players that Ethan Harrison remained untouchable. Near midnight, as the party reached its peak, Ethan stood alone at the stern, looking out over the dark waters of the Atlantic. The same waters that had claimed Ryan King 3 months earlier, the same waters that had carried away the last threat to his empire. Dustin approached, silent as always. Sir, we're ready to cast off for the midnight cruise around the bay, if you'd like to inform the guests. Ethan nodded. 5 minutes. When Dustin had gone, Ethan returned his gaze to the horizon. The night was clear, stars piercing the darkness above, city lights reflecting in the water below, his world perfectly ordered once again. A well-known film producer joined him at the railing, already slightly drunk. "Hell of a party, Harrison. Hell of a comeback after that mess with your wife." Ethan's expression didn't change. There was no comeback necessary. "My life continued as planned." Still, the man persisted, swirling his drink. Most guys would have taken a hit. Public humiliation, scandal, all that. But you, he gestured expansively, not even a scratch. "Most men are weak," Ethan replied simply. "They allow emotions to dictate their actions. They make mistakes. And you don't." Ethan turned slightly, his profile sharp against the night sky. "I calculate risks. I anticipate problems. I eliminate threats." The producer laughed uneasily. "Sounds cold, man." "Effective," Ethan corrected. "Weak men forgive. I don't." The producer fell silent, perhaps finally sensing the steel beneath Ethan's composed exterior. After a moment, he mumbled an excuse and retreated to the safety of the crowd. Ethan remained at the railing as the yacht's engines rumbled to life. Below, the dark water churned, swallowing the light from above, keeping its secrets, just as he kept his. Final verdict pulled away from the dock, carrying Los Diablos' elite into the night, all of them orbiting the quiet man at the center of the gathering. The man who had systematically destroyed those who betrayed him and emerged stronger than before. Behind them, the city skyline glowed, a testament to power and wealth. Before them, the endless ocean stretched into darkness, a reminder of consequences and finality. Ethan Harrison stood at the helm of it all, unmoved, untouched, undefeated, the king of his domain, the master of his fate, the man who never lost. Then fade to black. Thanks to everyone who took the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share your thoughts on the events in the comments below. Take care.